Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's study, and we're going to look at the chronology of the kings of Judah and Israel. We have to kind of go back all the way to Saul and his anointing, so we're going to do that. But before we do, let's open with a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we invite again your presence as we open your word. We are thankful for each person here and those that watch these videos. And we just pray for a blessing upon all, that your Holy Spirit can fill our hearts and minds, and that we can obey your voice. We ask that you can help us as we try to put bone to bone, as we prophesy to the bones and we see how these dates fit and align and the purposes in them and why they have created such a difficult puzzle for many. And we know, Lord, that we understand little, so we just ask for your wisdom and guidance. Be with us now, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so the problem that we are running into that I'm going to have to address is this problem here. So we have, this is one of my early charts of the kings of Judah and Israel. Now, and the United Kingdom, the United Monarchy here. Now, we know Saul becomes king in 1097. If we just do like a simple count, and we know that in 977, Rehoboam becomes the king of Judah, Jeroboam becomes the king of Israel, and we have to try to line these things up. When I was working through this in the past, I don't think I was as careful as I could have been. That is, I realized that there are details that I didn't pay attention to. Now, we know that Saul, David, and Solomon all reigned for 40 years each, but they didn't all reign exactly the same 40 years. We know that David reigned, how do they put it? He reigned 7.5 years plus 33 years, which gives us 40 and a half, right?
Yep.
A surface reading would give us that, yes.
Yeah. So the Bible isn't telling us, how many years and how many months Saul reigned. Now, how do we know how many years Saul reigned? What is the main basis for that?
I think it says it in Acts 13.
Right. So it's in Acts. Is it chapter 13 that it says that?
I think so. Somewhere around there.
Okay. So anyway, it's in the book of Acts that Saul reigned for 40 years. Now, there are people who have different ideas about how long Saul reigned. So one of the things that our chronology is largely based upon, we believe that when Saul reigned 40 years, that's accurate. Now, exactly how long that 40 years was, because I believe that his first year actually began in 1097 in the spring, and that he's not going to count an accession year. But if you look here on this, I have an accession year, right? I didn't count his first year as 1097. And he wouldn't have an accession year because he's not succeeding to the throne from a previous king in his dynasty. He's the first king. Yeah, so Anja has Acts chapter 13, verse 216.
No, 21, it's another typo. Sometimes I just don't bother looking at them anymore.
Well, I'm good there's not that many verses in the book in chapter 13 of Acts.
Oh, then it might be tracing all the kings.
Yeah, so Acts chapter 13. Which verse was it?
21.
Oh, okay, 21. And afterward they desired a king, and God gave unto them Saul the son of Kish, a man of the tribe of Benjamin, by the space of 40 years. Okay. And by the space of is not actually there, just 40 years is what it says in the Greek. Okay. So, yeah. So we know that Saul reigns 40 years. Now, the Bible writers in Kings, they're not going to, or in Samuel, they're not going to give us really enough to know that. We have to accept that Paul in Acts is saying 40 years. Some people ignore that. They just think that that's wrong. Paul was wrong. And that, Saul reigned just for a few years, right? They're going to compress all of that history into a short period of time. And so I've run into that with people. They just don't accept what it says in Acts. But we do. We know we also have the spirit of prophecy as well. But what we infer when we're counting his reign. Oops. Why is this not working? Okay, I see why. I'm looking at the wrong program. Yeah, so when we're counting his reign here, we can see we got his accession year. Now, so that means I would have to change this to being his first year. And then when we get to his 40th year is then going to be from the spring of 1058 to the spring of 1057. That is, his 40th year wouldn't be there. So David would end up becoming king in the 40th year before the spring, and then his first year would begin in 1057 in the spring. So this chart is not correct, is all I'm trying to say. that there isn't, it's not going to be, you understand what I'm saying? Now, there's a lot of strong evidence to show that Saul actually becomes king in the spring, right? So that was the thing that I was trying to show yesterday. So if we go to 1 Samuel chapter 9, when Saul was chosen to be king. So let's go there. So we obviously went through this. It's a pretty interesting story. We looked at it a bit yesterday. Now let's look at some of the things that show that this is in the spring. So I say, I just kind of know it intuitively, which isn't really, it means I guessed. Intuition. I do have good intuition. I'm good at guessing. That's why I could get good marks in school. I could guess, multiple choice exams, even if I didn't know what I was doing. But anyway, so when we look at this, we see that we're going to have Saul is going to be chosen, and he's going to be looking for his father's asses, right? So the time of year in which this occurs is indicated in a number of details in this story. So let me see if I can find what I'm looking for here. Okay, so it's the fact that they have them grazing. So the reason why the asses would be lost is they were grazing, right? So that's the first thing. And the grazing time of year is not going to be the fall, right? Like the time of year that you're going to be grazing these cattle is in the spring, right? That's just generally when it occurs, based on everything I could see. And other people have made this. So Saul's journey took him through the hill country of Ephraim and Benjamin. Traveling, grazing of livestock were most common in the spring when the winter rains had ended, but the summer heat had not yet scorched the vegetation. So that would be an indication it's in the spring. And that makes sense, right? That's, if you understand the weather there, they have different, they have seasons like we do, but their winter is a bit different than ours, at least here in Alberta. Our snow's almost gone now, but
But their winters like kind of California, their climate.
Yeah, they're Mediterranean climate. California is as well. Yeah. Okay, now there's also, so they're going to go through Mount Ephraim, pass through the land of Shalisha, which means trebled, because Shalash means three. But they found them not, and then they passed through the land of Salem, which has to do with foxes. That's the plural of foxes, which seems odd to me. And there were not. And there they were not. And he passed through the land of the Benjamites, but found them not. And when they were come to the land of Zuph, Saul said to his servant that was with him, "Come, let us return, lest my father leave caring for the asses, and take thought for us." And he said unto him, "Behold, now there's in the city a man of God," right? So they're going to go to Samuel, and to the seer, the prophet, and said Saul to his servant, "Well said." Okay, so here in 9:11, And they went up the hill to the city. They found young maidens going out to draw water, and said unto them, Is the seer here? Now, of course, people could be drawing water any time of year, but what do I have here? Okay. I have this written down. Huh. I don't see. Oh, here it is. Okay, so with the drawing of the water, so in the Levant, that is that area, water drawing typically happened at the village well or cistern. While this was a daily chore, the fact that the man of God, Samuel, had just arrived for a public sacrifice suggests a period of communal activity. So in there, so they're going up to the hill of the city, and they found young maidens going to draw water. So it seems that there is an activity that would be a communal activity. So that is, this is going to happen, that they're going to have this water, the availability of water, and the sacrifice that's going, and the timing of the sacrifice often aligned with the conclusion of the rainy season, that is the spring, before the summer drought made travel and large public feasts more difficult. So that's what I found in regard to that. So the women going out to draw water, and they're up to the hill of the city, right? So we understand that this is where they're going to be performing these sacrifices. Now in verse 26, and we had looked at this a little bit yesterday, but it says, And they rose early, and came to pass about the spring of the day that Samuel called Saul to the top of the house, saying, Up, and that I may send thee away. So they're going to be on the top of the house. So just the time of year, they're going to leave in the morning. So why would they leave in the morning early? What would be the reason? What time of year would you want to do that? Definitely you're not going to do that in the winter when it's cold. It's going to be, there's lots of sunlight, it's early morning, you're going to avoid the heat of the day on your travel, right? So, and then we have the nature of the feast in the high place. So this would be more connected often with the spring feasts, right? And then they sleep on the roof as well. So sleeping on the roof, this would be something that you would not do in the winter, in the rainy season. So I guess we can accept that this makes sense, that this is the spring, and that the first year of Saul is going to be 1097. So if we were going to mark the years, right, we wouldn't have an accession year. He's going to be the spring of 1097. Now, if we look at each of the transitions then, so I'll go back to this chart, with David becoming king, it's a little more problematic, right? Right. It's not as clear cut. There's lots happening there. How he's going to count his reign. Now, there is a change of dynasty, is the point that I'm trying to make with David, right? So you don't have this succession of reigns. You wouldn't have an accession year with David either, correct? Does that make sense? Now you might
agree.
Yeah. So you have a new dynasty. When you have a new dynasty, you don't have an accession year. You're not sharing the year. So we don't really know what Saul's count is, but we don't really need to know, right? We just need to know that Saul's count, that Saul's number of years that he reigns is 40 years. Now with David, there is going to be, from David to Solomon, this transition, which is going to have an accession year. Now, it doesn't tell us in David's reign that something happened in a particular year of his reign, right? Like it's not counting the years of his reign as when we get into the kings of Judah and Israel. Now we're going to start getting a count. With Solomon, we do have some, right? We have it in the 4th year of his reign that he's going to lay the foundation of the temple. And then in the 11th year of his reign, he's going to complete that, right? So we know when he lays it. So we know it's going to, well, it doesn't even say the 11th year, does it? It just says 7.5 years or 7 years in the months. So it just tells you the months, but we're going to know it's the 4th year. Is there any other year that it tells us in Solomon? Don't think so. Right. So for Solomon, we need to know when his 4th year is. So you can see some of the difficulty in understanding. We know that Solomon reigned 40 years. The other assumption that people make all the time is that if it says a king reigned 40 years, that means he died in the 40th year of his reign. But that's not always the case. And the one example that's pretty clear cut has to do with Jehoiakim. He's going to die in the 12th year of his reign, even though he only reigns 11 years. And that is he reigns shorter time than Zedekiah, I think by a month, roughly. So if they had said he reigned 12 years, then you would have had the count off. So they don't try to, say, well, he died in the 12th year of his reign, but he really only reigned 11 years. They just say he reigned 11 years. They don't tell you that it's in the 12th year of his reign that he dies. But you can figure it out once you figure out the chronology. But we don't know exactly how David is counting his reign. That is he counting his 1st year of his reign starting in the spring of 1057, or is he starting in 1056? But it doesn't matter, because it doesn't tell us that he died in the 40th year of his reign. We just know that he reigned 7 years in Hebron, which is also called 7 years and a half, right? 7.5 years. And then he reigned, besides that, 33 years. So altogether, it's 40.5 years. Okay? So that could mean that he died in what he called the 41st year of his reign, right? Does that make sense to people, that David could have died in the 40th year of his reign? So when we get to the problem that we're getting to here, now hopefully that's clear. Like, I don't know if we have to go through that in more detail, because we're dealing with the divided monarchy. Now, then when it comes to how we count Rehoboam's reign compared to Jeroboam's reign, that becomes, it seems clear to me that Jeroboam's reign, where it shows here's what I had, and it's different than Gerardos. So when we have here on the right side, we got Jeroboam, and on the left side, Rehoboam. So Judah and northern Israel. And then we can see that we're going to have this 17th year of, so it's going to be the 18th year of, how's it go? 1 Kings 15, verse 1. Okay, now in the 18th year of King Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, reigned Abijam over Judah. So Abijam is going to begin his reign, and he's going to be the king of Judah. He's going to begin his reign in the 18th year of King Jeroboam. But we know that Rehoboam only reigns 17 years. Now, again, we have this problem, because in the assumption that he reigns 17 years, so how do I put this? How do I visualize this? I mean, if we go back here, let's do it this way. Because I know thinking it through is not always easy. I'm going to bring up, let me use this. Okay, so this one just deals with kings of Judah and Israel. Now, I have here that we have an accession year for Rehoboam, and then Jeroboam is going to begin his reign in the fall. Now, when I looked at, now it's not quite clear here, I don't think. When I looked at Gerardos, his was like this. And so I think mine is better. So we're going to have, here he has the death of, he's going to have this in September, right? So he's just going to mark the fall, and that Rehoboam has an accession year, which I guess we have the same thing. I just was looking at it backwards. I think. Yeah. So Rehoboam's first year begins in 1096. So I think I have the same thing, right? Yeah. Where's this? Yeah, so I have his first year begins in the spring of 1096 as well. Okay, so we got the same thing. It just confuses me looking at these charts. I'm looking at mine right now on the other screen. So yeah, so he's going to have Rehoboam, Jeroboam's reign. His first year is going to begin in the fall. And that's what I have. Okay, so we got the same thing. Yeah, I was just looking. It's just weird because we're flipped over and it confuses me because I have Judah on the left and Israel on the right. He has Israel on the left and Judah on the right. So it looks weird. But one thing that we would say is that Jeroboam's first year begins in the fall. So he's going to choose the fall, right? And he's going to offer a month later, after he begins his reign, in the 8th month, he's going to have that 15th day of the 8th month where he's offering on the altar in Bethel, right? The golden calf there. Now, what we would say, though, is we don't know if we're going to have Solomon's reign, we would have that as the 40th year. So however David and Saul's reigns go, Solomon's reign, the 4th year, is 1013, right? So let's go back. Here we'll just use his. Right? So if we go back here, I feel like I'm punishing you guys when I do this, but hopefully, it's making sense. So there's going to be where he completes the temple in his 11th year. And then here it's going to be his 4th year. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
When Saul died, did David assume the kingship right out? Was it a period of time where he wasn't king and didn't have a king?
Well, yeah, there's definitely a bit of time there. It's, not very long. But also remember, he's just going to be king in Hebron for 7.5 years before he becomes king over all Israel.
Okay.
Right. So the thing that we don't, when we're dealing with these, okay, go on.
So Judah didn't have no king until after them 7 years.
No, Judah did, because Hebron's in Judah.
Okay, so it's Israel that didn't have one.
Yeah, they didn't have a king. Well, to say they didn't have a king, they did have Ishbosheth.
Oh, okay.
Right?
All right.
Or Ishbaal, however you want to call his name. Yeah, so they do have a king, but they don't have David as king. Now, the thing about it, when we talk about the reign, the years of their reign, we don't have documentation. So the Bible doesn't tell us that things are happening in this year of the reign of Saul or this year in the reign of David. They just plainly tell us that, David reigned 7.5 years in Hebron and 33 years in Jerusalem. So you add those together, you get 40.5. But how he particularly counted his reign it's not certain, right? Because he has a new dynasty. He could have died in the 41st year of his reign, right? Which I assume he did. But I've never put that in the charts. The way that we draw it, we just kind of simplify it. And so you're going to see here, when he goes back to David's reign. So I'm going to we'll go to the end of his reign. Go back just a bit here. So when Saul becomes king, you're going to see here Solomon becomes king. I should have said, I think I said Saul. Solomon becomes king. You're going to see that this is the 40th year of David's reign he has. But I would argue it's the 41st year as David would have counted it. Does that make sense to people? Because he reigned 40.5 years, we know, according to the Bible. And so his reign ends up being counted that his 40, because he doesn't have an accession year. That means if he was counting the years of his reign, if we had documents where it said something happened in the 39th year of David's reign, well, we would have to recognize that that's not the same as the 38th, right? In an accession year. So it'd be a non-accession year dating. That is, he doesn't have an accession year. So if you reign for 40 and a half years and you don't have an accession year, that means you died in the 41st year of your reign. Does that make sense? So the mistake that he's making, and I made the same mistake, so, I'm not perfect either. But when we go back to the transition between Saul and David, one thing that we would have to recognize is that there isn't an accession year. That is, you don't have this, 40th year and then at 0, right? You're going to have the first year of David being where he has the 0. That would be the first year. Now, we also have Ishbal's reign, right? So he shows that in there. David's going to be the dark blue. Ishbal's going to be this other lighter blue in the center between this column, right? And he just reigns for a couple of years. They have here, right? So he doesn't have the verse explaining that. Let me see, he does. So 2 Samuel 2:10 and 4 verse 5. Yep, Stephen.
Well, yeah, well, that would be wrong, wouldn't it? Because it's after 7 years then that Ishmael dies.
Yeah, I would think so. So I'm not sure why he does that. I'm trying to see what he's getting. He's got the verse references. So 2 Samuel 2 verse 10. But anyway, the main point that we have here is that we would see that David died in the 41st year of his reign. So Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel and reigned 2 years. But the house of David followed David. The house of Judah followed David. So I think that's where he's getting the 2 years. Now, how did we understand that when we went through this?
Yeah, so I think there's like a 2 years where there's no war.
Yeah.
And then after that, there's war between the two houses, and then David increases and he decreases.
Yeah. Yeah, because then the next verse says the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. And then the other verse that he gives us there, chapter 4, verse 5 to 7, and the sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite. Okay, so it's just going to be about his death of Ishbosheth. And the sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, and Rechab and Baanah went and came about the heat of the day to the house of Ishbosheth, who lay on the bed at noon. And they came thither into the midst of the house as though they would have fetched wheat. And they smote him under the 5th rib, and Rechab and Baanah, his brother, escaped. For when they came into the house, he lay on his bed in his bedchamber, and they smote him and slew him and beheaded him and took his head and gat them away through the plain all that night. And they brought the head of Ishbosheth unto David to Hebron and said to the king, behold, the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, thine enemy. Right? So, yeah, this is going to be later. So it doesn't really make sense. He should have had the 7 years there. But you can see the point is David's first year is going to be here. It starts in 1097, but he's going to die in his 41st year. So that is, right. So this here should be, 39 should be 40, the 40 should be 41. But because it's accession year dating, we wouldn't say that he reigned for 41 years, right? And the Bible has 40 and a half, basically, in the way that it frames it. So I would think that you have the 7.5 preceding, when he's going to start counting this first year in the spring. So he dies in the 41st year of his reign, if he's counting that from when he reigned, at the beginning, right? But he could have counted his reign, from when he was king over all Israel, right? Could have been the 33rd year of his reign. So what do we learn from this so far? I mean, we can see we have this puzzle. What are we learning in doing this process? What is our purpose here? because if we have to keep this always in the context of Ezekiel 37. If we're following line upon line, right? If we're going precept upon precept, that is, we're looking at each of these, we're setting these in order, we're putting these bones in order, these dates. As we do this, what are we learning? Besides, the fact we get the chronology correct. What is this process? What is it we're doing? Yeah, I had a piano student yesterday I think he's 10, and he's Mennonite, right? He's a Mennonite. They have, I think, 9 kids in their family. They just live across the back alley from me. Anyway, I'm trying to get him to think. He's not very good at thinking. So I ask him lots of questions about technique, like, why am I asking you to do it this way? Why are you practicing this way? How can you improve something? And he's not used to asking questions, which I find interesting. I always asked questions. I questioned everything. I was pretty problem kid in that way, with teachers, and never listened to them. But we're learning to ask questions, right? And why are we doing that? What are we seeking to gain in how we study? What rule are we using of Miller's rules? How's this benefiting us? Why is God asking us to prophesy to the bones that are lying in this valley, that are dry bones?
Because our brains are, as we could say, rusty, and we need to tax them and stir them up to think clearly and to find truth for what we believe in.
Yeah, and I see this in the study that we're doing with the Godhead, which is not something I wanted to study, just because of all the emotional stuff about it. But I got an email, I think it was Bonnie, with a video link, so watch the video. Was it that one, the video one? That one could have been just the manuscript. Anyway, I can't remember. There's so many things I looked at. But the conclusion that she was drawing had to do with the idea of when the third person of the Godhead, and that this just had to do with a character. And it's sort of what I call a specious reasoning, in the sense that it's philosophical. It's not straightforward. It's not just taking God as his word, not taking Ellen White as she's talking in a plain way. It's trying to manipulate the words to fit something. And I've said many times, conspiracies theorists are not going to be saved. And in some ways, I said that way to shock people, to sort of think about it. But there is a reality about how we come to understand things and how we come to believe things, because we are not very smart, right? In the scheme of things, we know very little. We're not very logical. We're very subjective creatures. And yet God has given us a way to understand what is true. He's given us Miller's rules. He's given us the Bible that explains those rules and teaches us how to know what is true and how not to be caught in the trap that other people get caught in with fanaticism. And it's not simple authority, right? That is, God isn't just saying, I said this, you just have to accept it. Because he says, come, let us reason together. So God is wanting us to understand, not just to accept what someone else says, how somebody interprets something. So when we look at how we have approached this, we could call it forensic, examination of the chronology. We're looking for clues. We say, when was he made king? When was Saul made king? It was what time of year? Is there any clues, right? So we look for those things. But there is also a submission at the same time to the word of God. And so this isn't just us being critical and not accepting things that are told to us, that there's something more going on in how we're approaching this. So how would most people approach the chronology of the Bible if they were going to, let's say, prove the 2520? What would people mostly do? Anybody with?
I'm not sure.
Okay, well, what would have you seen? So if you wanted to know 723 BC, is that when the 2520 starts for Israel? You would find some statement somewhere online or in a book that says in 723 some event happened, like the fall of Samaria, which is what I had done initially, right? I looked up 723 BC, what event happened. Edwin Thiel said the Samaria fell in 723 BC. I said, oh, we have there a date, 723 BC, that fits the 2520 for northern Israel. And that would be where most people would leave it, right? They would have this quote. Now, when you're using Edwin Thiel, though, what is the problem? Even if you get him saying 723 BC is the fall of Samaria, which we know it's actually now 721, but you're going to have it based upon a logic that's faulty. So people just tend to find something that agrees with their view, but it's not a complete picture. So which rule are we following of Miller's? You may not know the number, but what is that rule? What's the principle involved? Would it be this rule? So this is rule, well, there's a number of rules actually that would apply. To understand doctrine, bring all the scriptures together on a subject you wish to know, then let every word have its proper influence. And if you can form your theory without a contradiction, you cannot be in error. Right? So that's rule number 4. Jeff, did you say something?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Just making noise.
So the principle there is we bring together everything. Now, if I just take, some man's word, 723 BC was the fall of Samaria, and I build my foundation on that, then somebody comes along and shows me that it was 721 that Samaria fell. What happens to my foundation?
Well, you'll know you're off by 2 years or approximately 2
Right.
years. And
so the natural thing that is I was wrong. And so maybe the whole 2520 was wrong because I came to that crisis myself personally, right? I realized it was 721 and I was just ready to give up the whole 2520 thing because there has to be no contradiction. But then God told me to read Isaiah 7-12. So I read it and then I realized it's the captivity of Hoshea that marks the 2520 for northern Israel. So when we have all of these sort of disparate evidences, all these different things that we pulled from different authorities, and we try to fit them together, we're going to find all kinds of contradictions because people are going to start with different premises. They're going to be studying, with a whole different purpose or aim. They might have a lot of wrong dates because they're trying to prove something else. And so we have all of this confusion. That's what exists within Adventism. And the thing that this movement is meant to do is to bring us back to the foundation. Now, we think the foundation is just the charts, but it's not just the charts. It's how those charts came to be, right? That there's a reason that we have the 1843 chart, and it has to do with Miller and his method of study. And why did the Protestants fail the first angel's message? What was their failure?
Well, from what I've seen when dealing with them is they prefer their doctrines. We had quite a clash about that. You prefer the doctrines of men, the traditions of your church, to what the Bible actually says.
Right. Now we have
I was going to say they didn't have the key. They didn't have the 14 rules.
Okay, right. So they're using a different methodology. Now, we also had a counterfeit in this movement with Parminder, a book regarding methodology, right? So Parminder was presenting what he claimed was Miller's rules, but were not. Right? He's going to give you Jesuit rules of interpretation, which was man's authority. Right? He clearly says it. You don't know how to study. And if you did know how to study, you would come to the same conclusions as we do. So you should just accept our conclusions and our method of study. And if you do study under us, you will come to the same conclusions, because basically we're going to brainwash you. Now, so we understand that we can know the truth, that individually God can speak to each one of us and we can know the truth. But then we have what I find interesting, and I'm going to be hard on the Godhead people, but they're not using Miller's rules. They're using man's authority in a pretense of standing against authority, right? So they're not using the forensic method in trying to understand the Godhead, and you've seen it in the studies. The approach is one of speculation, jumping to conclusions, picking and choosing. It's sort of this philosophical manipulation of language, and it should be easy to see the difference. And then the use of other people's arguments. That is, they want to jump into the advanced studies, but they haven't begun with the first principles of the oracles of God, right? They don't recognize that we're not advanced, that there are things that we cannot understand. And so we need to go find out what God reveals. So they want to know about God's ontology, that is what God is made out of, and what kind of being he is and so forth, which is something Ellen White tells us is not revealed. We can't know these things. They're not revealed in the scripture. We can't discern them from the scriptures. It's something beyond human comprehension. So when we're studying these things, because I look at this, we're prophesying to the bones, right? So remember when we looked at Ezekiel 37 and we talked about there's 3 different prophesyings that he has to do, right? He's going to prophesy upon these bones. That's the first angel's message. So can we see that in prophesying upon the bones, that first angel's message is Miller's rules, this setting these bone to his bone, right? Right. So the bones came together, bone to his bone.
Yeah, the Miller's rules are the basis of Bible study.
Yeah, and Miller's rules come from the Bible, so he didn't just make them up out of thin air. As he studied the Bible, he learned about the rules. And of course, we have expanded those rules. We've taken the principles there and we can expand them.
14 biblical rules, you could say that.
Yeah. I mean, you could condense them even. You could expand them, because these are principles, and principles can be expressed in different ways, in different examples. In some ways, his rules overlap, because rule number 6, where it says, God has revealed things to come by visions, in figures, and parables, and in this way the same things are often revealed again and again by different visions or in different figures and parables. If you wish to understand them, you must combine them all in one. Well, that's really the same as rule 4. To understand doctrine, you must bring every word together, right? And let them all have their proper influence. Bring all the scriptures together. So whether you're bringing all the scriptures together or you're bringing all of the visions, figures, parables together, you're actually doing the same thing, right? So rule 4 and rule 6 are the same rule, just expressed differently. So bringing all the scriptures together and combining them all in one is really the same thing. So that's line upon line. And really that's what most of his rules are expression of, is line upon line. How that's done. Now we understand lines to be also timelines. So that was not something that Miller fully articulated, though it is kind of implied in the way that he presents his rules. So that would be the first thing. When we put bone to his bone, when we put we put this skeletal structure together of chronology, we're doing so following Miller's rules. Now, we're using his rules all the time, but it's really about the rules in the first place. That is the approach that we have on chronology. The thing that I learned from working through this chronology was not to accept any man's authority. That I couldn't just look up on the internet and find support for 723 or even 677, right? Because 677, that's the date that, Ussher gives. But I have to know, how does he come to that conclusion? And he didn't have Prism B. He didn't have S.R. Hayden's own words talking about taking Manasseh captive. He didn't have that information. Now, Ellen White didn't have that information either, yet she writes about it. That is not specifically referring to Prism B, but when you look at how she articulates the story of Manasseh being taken captive to Babylon, the temporary capital of Assyria, you then realize that she understands that it is under S.R. Hayden that Manasseh is taken captive. Now, you could say, well, she knew that from Ussher as well. So it's not a unique knowledge, but she gets the details right, which Ussher doesn't really address, because he's not going to know that it's the temporary capital. He's not going to know that reason because he doesn't have that information. So Ellen White does from God, right? So we know, though, that it's not just simple authority of man, right? So that is, we don't take the authority of man, and it is an authority of the scriptures themselves. So we take the scriptures as an authority, but we're approaching the scriptures in a reverent manner. So when we talk about taking your shoes off your feet, what does that mean spiritually as a symbol?
Showing respect when you enter into the presence of God.
Okay, so there's a respect. Now you'd think, depending on the culture you're in, like maybe keeping your shoes on might be more respectful. Depends on the culture, right? But ancient cultures had taking your shoes off. Most cultures, you take your shoes off when you come into a house. Not in America generally, but every other place in the world. So taking your shoes off your feet. But what about more symbolically? What does that mean? Because what are shoes? Now, maybe I'm stretching it here a little bit.
Well, Ephesians 6 talks about shoes representing the gospel of peace.
Okay.
But I mean, just in a practical sense, you don't bring dirt into the house if you remove your shoes at the door.
Yeah, well, there could be that, but and we could look at it as the gospel, man's gospel. See, I look at shoes as something that man has made and put together. So by taking the shoes off our feet, what we are doing when we approach God is we're setting aside our presuppositions. We're setting aside our biases. We're approaching God as a learner, right? We're approaching the scriptures as a learner. We're not approaching the scriptures to find arguments to defeat other people. That's not the purpose of studying this. And that is extremely important. Like, it's not just some minor difference. If you are approaching the scriptures to win an argument, you have your shoes on your feet, right?
Yeah, I think we've all fallen into that trap.
Oh, yeah. We all have. Yeah, we all have. But you can see why Ellen White talks about taking your shoes off your feet when it comes to something like the Godhead. I mean, in a sense, we do every time we approach the scriptures. But because people approach something like that with a bunch of presuppositions, with a bunch of beliefs, biases, and prejudices, and so that's how we're approaching this chronology, and we have to. That is, we're forced into it because of the reality. There's so much disagreement on it, and the way that most people deal with it is it's not important, right? That is, most people just throw up their hands, and I can understand why. It's a very difficult topic. And on the surface, it can appear to be unimportant. Why do I need to know this information? Just give me the conclusion, and I'll decide whether I accept it or not. But we have to understand these things for ourselves. We have to understand the basis.
Yeah, we have to understand the foundation of it. We need to know the foundation of that.
Yeah. And chronology is the skeleton of the system. Without a skeleton, you're pretty flaccid. You're not going to have any support. You can't even stand on a foundation. You just lie there, I guess. So we definitely need this to understand prophecy. We need an understanding of chronology. So as a Seventh-day Adventist, we would all know we have to have 457 BC. We got to have Jesus crucified in the midst of the week in 31 AD. We have to have the 2300 days end in 1844. But as Seventh-day Adventists, based on the type of authority that they have accepted, if the scholar comes along and says there's no basis for 457, Jesus wasn't crucified in 31 AD because the calendar doesn't work for a Friday crucifixion in 31 AD. So if you want to have 31 AD, you need to be a Wednesday crucifixionist. That's why there's Wednesday crucifixionists in Adventism, even though Ellen White's absolutely unequivocally says it's a Friday. But, they can brush aside spirit of prophecy. People do it all the time. It's easy to do. So not sure why it's easy for people, but they do it. So you can see the importance of this approach. So we're doing this first one, the bones. Now then I'm saying that when he prophesies to, so the second one is, Lord said, thus saith the Lord God unto these bones, behold, I shall cause breath to enter into you, and ye shall live. So prophesy upon these bones, and I will lay sinews. Okay, so I'm going to go later. So he's going to prophesy upon the bones. This mouse is just really annoying. I know I have to get a new one. I always keep saying that. So he's going to prophesy to the wind, prophesies to the bones, to the wind. So he holds the, so let me see, how do you do this? I'm trying to see where the 3 steps are. Okay. So prophesy on these bones. I'll cause these bones to hear the word of the Lord. Then said the Lord unto these bones, behold, I'll cause breath to enter in you, and ye shall live. So they lay sinew, right? And I prophesied as I was commanded. As I prophesied, there was a noise, and behold, the shaking, the bones came together, and bone to his bone. When I beheld, lo, the sinews and the flesh came upon them, and the skin covered them above, but there was no breath in them. And then he said unto me, prophesy unto the wind. So I prophesied unto the wind, right? And the breath came into them, and they lived and stood upon their feet, an exceeding great army. Then he said unto me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. So is there 3 prophesyings, or is there 2? How do we see this here?
I thought there were 3.
Yeah, me too. So he's prophesied to the bones, and then when he prophesies, the bones come together, bone to their bone. And thus saith the Lord, unto these bones, behold, I will cause breath to enter into you, and I will lay sinews upon you, and will bring flesh upon you. So he prophesies unto the bones, that then he's going to prophesy, then they're going to have this flesh on the bones. So I prophesied as I was commanded. And as I prophesied, there was a noise, and behold, the shaking of the bones came together, bone to his bone. And when I beheld, lo, the sinews and the flesh came upon them, and the skin covered them above. There was no breath in them. So it looks like here there's just 2 prophesyings. And then he said unto me, prophesy unto the wind, right? So it's just the way that he tells them to do this, and then what he actually does. Because he first asks, can these bones live? He says, you know that they can, right? You're the one who knows all things. And I guess here, this is a little bit obscure as far as like different translations here. I'll just show you what different translations do with this. Contemporary English version says, Lord, only you can answer that, right? So that's sort of that type of interpretation. easy to read version. Oh Lord, only you know the answer to that question. English majority text, that's New Testament. Oh Lord, thou knowest. What's this other one? Here's Young's. O Lord Jehovah, thou hast known. That's what he translates it as. So the idea here, though, is it could be that you actually know that it can happen. So there's different ways in which you could translate that phrase. What I'm saying is it's not directly clear what he means by his response when he answers, "O Lord, thou knowest." It could be, "Oh Lord, you know that it can happen, that they can live, because you have that knowledge. I don't, but you know," right? So that could be how it's understood. But anyway, get back to the King James. So again, he said unto me. So he asked the question, and he said unto me, "Prophesy upon these bones." And in the prophesying of the bones, he says, "Behold, I will cause breath to enter in you, and ye shall live. And I will lay sinews upon you, and bring up flesh upon you, and cover you with skin, and put breath in you, and ye shall live, and ye shall know that I am the Lord." So that's in his direction. So he says, you're going to prophesy unto the bones, and I will cause breath to come into the bones. And then he goes back, "I will lay sinews upon you, bring flesh upon you, and cover you with skin, and put breath in you." So the bones are going to come together. He's going to lay sinews upon it, bring flesh, cover them with skin. So you got the sinews, the flesh, the skin. Those are the three physical things added to the bones, right? So the bones themselves don't have that. So those are going to be added. And then also the breath. I just think there's something, we're missing here in this. Like there's something about this story that intrigues me. Some layer in understanding this structure. "So I prophesied as I was commanded. As I prophesied, there was a noise, and behold, a shaking, and the bones came together, bone to his bone." So I would still argue that this is the first angel's message, right? "And behold, lo, the sinews and the flesh came upon them, and the skin covered them above, but there was no breath in them." So that to me is the methodology. That's Miller's rules over there on the right side. Right? You have these rules that were used to understand these prophecies. So that's prophesying unto the bones, and then the line upon line. But even when that happened, there's no breath in them, right? So that still has to happen. So then he has to prophesy unto the wind. And we had some discussion about this, dealing with the four winds and so forth, because it's going to mention the four winds come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe upon these slain that they may live. Now, so he's going to do this prophesying, right? "And the breath came into them, and they lived, and stood upon their feet, an exceeding great army." And then he says, "Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. And behold, they say, our bones are dried, our hope is lost, and we are cut off for our parts. Therefore prophesy and say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, O my people, I will open your graves and cause you to come up out of your graves, and bring you into the land of Israel, and ye shall know that I am the Lord, when I have opened your graves, O my people, and brought you up out of your graves, and shall put my spirit in you, and ye shall live, and I shall place you in your own land, then shall ye know that I, the Lord, have spoken it and performed it, saith the Lord. So we can see how this would not be fulfilled literally in the sense of that time, right? There isn't a time that God's going to make a resurrection of people from their graves and they return to the land of Israel. So we know there are different interpretations on how people take this valley of dry bones. So if you're a dispensationalist who believes in literal Israel fulfills prophecy, you would read this and say, oh, they returned to their own land. That's 1945 or whatever the year was. I should know that. A Jewish friend of mine had it as the password for it to get into his house. They didn't have keys; they had a combination. So, where you push the buttons or whatever. It's 1945, right?
I think it's 1948.
48?
I think so.
I always get that
May
mixed up.
14th, I think, 1948.
Okay, maybe it's 1948. That might make more sense because it's after the war.
14th of May, 1948 was when
Okay.
they kind of declared the Israeli state.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
I
that
think
makes
then
more
a
sense.
war kind of
Yeah, because
so
it
it had
takes a
to
few years
prevent it.
after the war. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. May 14th, 1948. I won't forget that one now. Okay.
Then President Trump then marked 70 years by opening the embassy,
Okay.
U.S. embassy in Jerusalem. Then
Yeah.
previously it was in Tel Aviv.
Yeah. And you're going to have all these evangelicals, believing that, this is all fulfillment of these prophecies regarding Israel, right? They just make up stuff. But we know this isn't talking about literal Israel. This is talking about God's people. As far as literally coming out of their graves, that's, we could say it applies to the resurrection. It's typifying what's going to happen at the resurrection of the righteous. But from a prophetic point of view, just like the temple is not a literal temple that he's going to talk about in chapter 40 and on, we know that this isn't to be taken literally, right? There isn't the valley full of dry bones, right? Because Ezekiel's in vision. Right? He's obviously not in a valley full of dry bones where he's prophesies to the bones and all these bones get put bone to their bone and there's a huge army of people that are raised up. It's in vision, right? So it is a prophecy, and he says that he does it, but it's not real. Okay. So we'd have to take that. So, but we can say that this is Millerite history, that in Millerite history that occurred, but it's typical of our history, that this is what we're doing. So however we understand this, as far as, exactly how this fits into Millerite history, we can understand this as the line upon line methodology. This is what we're doing. We're now putting bone upon bone, and God is filling in. He's the one doing this by studying. So it gets back to the question of what we're doing. So we can see now that we're questioning things in a particular way. Are we manipulating the text to do so? We would have to say, no, we're not. We're looking at what the text says. Now, we could do a study, which we're not going to do, but we could have done a study on trying to prove, because we kind of did go through it a little bit. How do we know how long Saul reigned, and why people will take things and misuse them to sort of destroy the chronology of the kings of Saul, David, and Solomon? People come up with all different kinds of chronologies, but they're not consistent, right? So we're going to, we've addressed it before, but now that we're getting into the kings of Israel and Judah, and again, we keep doing all this initial preliminary work, and I talk a lot about what we're doing, but we can see that this is, so we're going to have here, as we go into Abijam, right? He's going to reign, it says, 3 years, but we know that that's not the case. So let's go back to these documents. So I'm not sure. Okay, when we look at this document here, so we're going to try to, so I guess what we would do here, this is correct, right? So we're going to say that that's the 40th year of, now in 977, then that means that if that's going to be the accession year of Rehoboam, that means you would have to have Solomon dying and in his 40th year, and his 40th year being ending in the spring of 976, right? And so that means he would have to have died after the start of the year in the spring. Okay? He couldn't have died in February or anything. So I think that's a mistake that I was. So The one thing we do know is it takes time for Jeroboam to become king. That was one of the main things that so we would say that Solomon must die in the spring. Rehoboam, then his first year is going to start in the spring of 976. So he's going to have an accession year. Jeroboam is going to come to the throne, and then his first year is just going to start in the fall. And so does that makes sense to people that we're going to have, because we have to have them staggered this way. If we're going to have that Jeroboam, well, maybe there's other solutions to the puzzle, but if Jeroboam is going to be succeeded by, or not Jeroboam, Rehoboam succeeded by Abijam. I have Abijah, it's Abijam, right? Where does I have that? Abijam, right? So Rehoboam's going to die. He's going to reign 17 years. And his reign is going to start before Jeroboam's, right? Because he's going to become king right after Solomon dies. And then Jeroboam's going to take time to become king. But then Abijam becomes king in the 18th year, and he's going to reign 3 years. And Abijam, of course, is, what's going on there? Just stopped responding. So he's going to reign 3 years, it says. But really, if he dies in the 20th year of the reign of Jeroboam, then you see that they have to stagger this way, right? There's no other way to do it. You couldn't have Rehoboam counting his first year in the spring of 977 and Jeroboam in the fall, and that work, right? So you have to stagger them this way, right? You have to have, however you're staggering them, you have to have it staggered. You definitely can't have them be in the same years, but you have to make it so that the 18th year is going to start for Jeroboam before the 17th year of Rehoboam ends. Now we could just say, well, it's 17 years and maybe they, had their but that still wouldn't work. Now this is the only way it really works, right? I can't think of another way to do this. Do people understand what I'm talking about, or does somebody not understand what I'm talking about, how these are staggered, and how that if he's going to begin to reign in the 18th year of Jeroboam, that is Abijam is, and he reigns 3 years, and Asa becomes king in the 20th year, that this is the only way that we can do this. There is no other way. Like if we staggered these some other way, it would not work, right? Even if we made them the same year, it wouldn't work. Especially it wouldn't work. You can't say 3 years if you, I guess you could say it's an inclusive count, 18 to 20. So 18, 19, 20 is 3. So maybe there's a way that they could do that. But because of the nature of this, that it shows that they're staggered, that he doesn't reign, and he doesn't reign 2 years. And it's also a accession year dating. We're sort of forced to do it this way. So Asa is going to reign in the 20th year of Jeroboam, Abijam in the 18th year. And so it's probably going to be, since he reigns 3 years, that accession year would happen after the fall of 960, that Abijam is going to pass away, and before the spring of 959. Okay, so
Maybe not now, but I'm just thinking you maybe draw it out just to make it clearer.
do what?
You can sort of draw it out with the years and
Well, it is drawn
make
out.
it clear.
It is drawn out. We got the years over on the left. You see that there, right? Like, how would you draw it? Like linearly, like horizontally on a line? It's just a vertical line. It's really the same as drawing out horizontally. It's vertical.
Right, okay.
To me, I mean, maybe drawing it horizontally, people can see that better. Maybe this vertical way. But if you look at this, here you got the 18th year. So it's going to be in this period of time. That is before the fall of 960, and so or after the fall of 960, before the fall of 959. So it's in that 18th year. So it has to be in there somewhere. Now, since he's going to reign 3 years, that means it must be between the fall of 960 and the spring of 959. That's what it would mean. So that's going to be his accession year. Then his first year is going to begin, right? And then his second year is he's going to have these 2 years. And then in his third year, after the spring of 957, he's going to die. And Asa then comes to the throne. So in the scriptures, when you look at this story, in chapter 15 of 1 Kings, we haven't read about Asa yet, but it says in the 20th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, reigned Asa over Judah, right? Now 41 years reigned he in Jerusalem. So he's going to have a long reign. Now it says, and his mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Absalom. Well, that's actually his grandmother, because Abijam, his mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Absalom. So this is so why do they mention this, who his grandmother is? Like, they don't have really a word for grandmother. So what is this telling us? Like, why would they mention the grandmother, not the mother? So if we read on, it says, Asa did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord, as did David his father, and he took away the Sodomites out of the land and removed all the idols that his fathers had made, and also Maacah, his mother. Even her he removed from being queen, because she had made an idol in a grove, and Asa destroyed her idol and burnt it by the brook of Kidron. So his grandmother, he's going to depose her. So she basically would be, like, what does it mean that she's a queen? So she has some place within the royal house, but she's going to lose that place. Yeah, so this is not Absalom, the son of David.
Well, wouldn't it represent a false church?
Hmm?
Wouldn't she represent a false church?
Okay, well, yeah, we haven't made an application of it yet. It could have some application. I don't know where we would put that, in what history and what line. Right now, we're just kind of looking at the story itself. So Asa is going to be faithful to God, right? He's going to have, he's going to take his grandmother, remove her from the royal family, so to speak. Her royal privileges are removed in some way because she had made an idol in a grove. So Asa destroyed her idol and burnt it by the brook Kidron. And so when it says, and he brought in the things which his father had dedicated and the things which himself had dedicated into the house of the Lord, silver and gold and vessels. Who's his father here in this context? How far does this father go back? Is his father here referring to Solomon, is the question. Because remember, they just use the word father for.
Would it be Solomon or would it be David? Or could it be both?
Well, I think it would be Solomon, just because these are the things we would connect this to things Solomon did, not anything particularly that David did, because Solomon's going to be the one that dedicates the temple and brings in all the vessels and everything. David doesn't do that, right? David doesn't really build the temple, so Solomon does. But the point is, it's not referring to Abijam. It's not referring to Rehoboam, right? It's referring to someone before that, which would be Solomon.
2 Chronicles 11:21 says, and Rehoboam loved Maacah, the daughter of Absalom, above all his wives and his concubines.
Okay,
so and then
so 2 Chronicles
11:21. He says he took wives and 60 concubines,
Okay, so you are right there.
and begat 28 sons and 60
Okay.
daughters. You add all
Okay,
those
so-
up. It's interesting.
So is this Absalom, though, is this the son of David?
Well, that's what I thought.
Because definitely, because the name Absalom and Absalom are the same name. So this is Rehoboam's going to have all these different wives and concubines, right? So how did we find out? See if anybody has any way to show this. If we just look at a commentary, whatever they tell us, it's correct. No, sometimes they give us references. Yes, it doesn't mention here this situation. I'm just going to go back here. Verse 10.
Well, I added up all these concubines and wives and sons and daughters, and I got 166. And if you reverse that, it's 661, and I was thinking of FFA.
Yeah, that's interesting. So maybe it is Absalom. I don't see anybody saying anything particularly about it. So they, maybe if I go back to this verse, they'll comment on that there. So it must be the same Absalom, according to other people. So it is the son of David. So basically, she would be the granddaughter of Absalom, is what this commentary is saying, just because of the time involved. Does that make sense? Okay. So lots of things we have to learn. Okay. Any final thoughts before we close with prayer?
I'm just looking at my tabled history.
Yeah.
I'm thinking I'm pretty much in agreement with the 960 and the 957 relating to Rehoboam's death and then Abijah dies. But I think it might be 973, like BCI put for the 5th year of Rehoboam. I'm thinking maybe you have it there 972, I think.
Yeah. I know.
Would maybe need corrected.
Yeah. Just
It
because.
couldn't be 973.
I think it's 972, the 5th year. That's how we would put it. I don't think it could be 973 because that'd be the 4th year.
Right, okay. Thanks. I can maybe change that.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, let's close with prayer. The dear Father in heaven, we are grateful again for the things that we are learning. We ask that you can give us patience as we continue to study in this way and understand these stories. Thank you for the way that you lead and guide us and the wisdom that you give us. Help us to study these things on our own. And we pray for those who watch these videos that they can be blessed. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.